Welcome to In Conversation with the Safety Collaborators. I am Karen.
And I am Nuala. Whether you're a safety professional, a leader, or an individual committed to making a difference,
We invite you to join the discussion on creating a culture of safety and care, enabling your team and leaders to design a safer and more productive and collaborative world. Today we are joined by Alexsandro Siedschlag, a safety leadership coach, human factors specialist, safety differently enthusiast, and friend of safety collaborations. Alex is from a small coastal city in the south of Brazil and has enjoyed working internationally in shipping, oil and gas, and mining. We are going to continue our exploration on the return of investment of leadership and safety coaching, the lenses we should use to measure, what lagging indicators to avoid, and a whole lot more.
I am delighted to finally be having this conversation with you, Alex. It has been a long time in the making, and it has been such a joy. We were trying to figure out when we actually met, and it was through LinkedIn that we have started having numerous conversations about safety, safety culture, and everything in between. So before we dive into the return of investment on all of this, who is Alex and what makes you you?
Hello, Nuala. Hello, Karen. Thanks for having me. Indeed, it has been a while until we first started drafting on having this conversation. So I appreciate you are taking this time as well, Karen. Thanks for welcoming here. Yeah. What makes Alex? I would say a lot of fun, a lot of family time, a lot of interesting in reading and learning and a lifelong learning, I would say. I really like to discuss ideas. I'm a kind of a quiet guy, an introvert, I would say, if you would describe me using profiles. But at the same time, I like to talk. So I don't know how this paradox works, but once I'm comfortable with people, like I'm here, I like to talk. So yeah, I like to surf. That's my hobby. I just did that this morning. It was amazing. Refresh my mind, refresh my soul. So just be outside, doing outside sporting. Yeah, so I have two kids, Sophie and Ravi, 4 and 10. My wife, Rachel, and living in a small place here in Brazil, South Brazil, and going around the world, traveling and work. So lovely. That's me.
Sounds blissful.
It does. I'm going, when can I come and visit?
Yes.
You're more than welcome in the summer.
Summer sounds amazing.
Yeah,
Absolutely. But I loved what you were saying about if we had to describe you with profiles, that you may be introverted, and that might be where you get your energy from, out on the surf on your own, being able to absorb nature. But when
yeah,
you're comfortable, you're happy to talk. As we go into this conversation around coaching and around safety leadership, it's, I think, one of those wonderful things that it's not just that it's a paradox, but it's the value in learning to understand yourself so that you can then understand those who are around you. So if you have to think about, before we dive into the ROI, and I promise you we will get there, but the time even that you've spent on site with all the learning you've done and the reading and the exploration of knowing who you are and what makes you you, how has that helped you when you are out on site and working with teams?
that's a good question. I think that kind of emotional intelligence, if you want to use a fancy word or fancy description for that, getting to know yourself better and understanding your emotions and reactions and thinkings. I think that calibrates you very much. You understand where your headspace is before you enter in a conversation. And that doesn't mean you might not get hijacked during the conversation, but it means that you know where you are when it starts. And by experience that, you have pretty much knowledge and hands-on experience to tell other people that it works and it helps. You know what I mean? Like when you go with a profile assessment to a leader and helps him to understand himself better by your own experience, how that kind aha moment looks like, and then you're just sharing, like your real person, your real you, and encouraging him as well to get to know his real person and real yourself or himself. Yeah.
And bringing in that authentic, this is who I am and I'm okay with who I am. But I also realize that I sometimes need to adjust or tweak to be able to get the best out of other people around me.
Yeah.
Karen and I were actually on a session this morning that was really diving into personality diversity and how we all tick. And that whole thing around, we used to go, we need to treat others as we want to be treated. And how actually no, because
Mm.
I'm me, no one else is me.
Yeah.
What I need to do is to learn as a leader or as a human being to treat others as they need to be treated.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a shift.
Yeah. While you were talking, it just came to my mind. Senior executive in one of the sites I worked on, who was very vocal, extroverted, liked to express his ideas, talk freely with no scripts or prompts. But as a senior leader, whenever he shared his opinions, that kind of becomes a rule because everyone listened to him and follows him. And I remember we were having a kind of a conversation that he was keen to hear more from his crew than he was. And then I shared back, or I gave him some feedback, said, how much of your time are you talking or are you listening? You know, like I know you like to talk, I know you do very well, but once you are talking, people are listening to you, so they won't talk over you. You know what I mean? You can talk, but in the end, over their opinions or after they share what they think. And he was like, I never thought about that. I thought that me talking would encourage them to talk. I said, yeah, if you are peer, like that's a shot of friends. But if you are a senior executive, they barely will confront your ideas or challenge your ideas. So, and that's getting to know yourself. So yeah.
Did he embrace that feedback? Did he actually start listening more?
Yeah, no, that was a like kind of aha moment. A few moments after that conversation, he came to me. You see how much percent I talking to? Like he was joking, but grabbing that learning or that discussion. So yeah, I think he did. Hopefully he kept that after I left. And I think that's one of the points on our talk today. Like the return on investment, the sustainability of any coaching process, and how much does that help? Yeah.
I think one of my favorite things to share with a leader or anybody actually is one of the most powerful tools you have is silence.
So true. Alex, I love the way that you can read my mind because exactly that was going into, you just think of that one small intervention. It might not seem like something great, but it can have such an incredibly profound impact on the team, on the way of working, the ability for people to speak up, the ability for people to challenge, just by shifting from talking to listening. I think when we talk about return of investment on coaching, and especially in the safety and the leadership environment, it's difficult to quantify. How do you actually quantify that? Because it was maybe a 5-minute conversation that has possibly impacted this leader for the rest of their life, that will create better teams, better ways of working, and safer working environments. When you think about where do you even start? Where do you start trying to measure the return of investment on something like this?
Yeah, it's kind of a elephant in the room where most of people might not want to talk about it, but I got obsessed about it once we discussed that rough idea in the past. Nula, I went to research, I went to understand what other people were thinking and or doing about this. I found some interesting stuff, but I found also some crap. So as usual. So in my opinion, of course. But I think one of the quotes that struck me was coaching and return of investment over coaching. It's usually about soft skills that provides soft data. It's soft skills and soft data. So that's why I think it's so hard to measure because,
Mm.
as you mentioned, a small intervention, a small conversation will lead to a very slight different approach in the future that might not be even possible to measure. But there are other points of the business, of other aspects of the business that will be influenced by the coaching process and the leadership process that can be looked at and measured, at somehow. So
I think that is just so profound what you said about soft skills and soft data, because it answers such a huge frustration that I have. Because I was sitting with a sales team this week, and that was part of the conversation is, well, How do you measure what you do? What are you going to be able to say to people? This is the result of this fantastic intervention that I've had, because we're generally going in to speak to not the people we're going to be coaching. We're going into speaking to the finance team or the HR team or somewhere along those lines. And they need hard stuff. They need to know, okay, so this project that you worked on, you managed to escalate that project was finished on time, on budget, with no accidents or incidents in comparison to the 3 projects the company had done before. Or over the intervention that you worked with them, you watched their incident rate decrease from X percentage per month down to whatever it was by the time you left.
Yeah.
And the soft data is hard. So I don't think we can try and miraculously figure out how to measure the soft data, but maybe there are other things that can show up that can help us. And Karen, I can see your brain working overtime there.
I was just thinking, I did some work with I can't think of her name at the moment, and it was about this very subject. How do we determine return on investment? Investment, actually, in this case, on the time that we as coaches spend with senior leader or whoever it is that we're coaching, and particularly in the more senior roles, I think. And then I'm actually, and Nuala remind me, because I have an entire spreadsheet and all sorts of things that we can use for this. So,
Exciting.
well, if you're into spreadsheets, but yeah. You can look at the time if you start off thinking about, well, what is the problem we're trying to solve with this coaching engagement? Is it because they feel like they don't have enough time, for example? Well, how do we dive into that? If you don't have a lot of time, let's have a look at where your time is being spent, because that time does equate to money because we get paid. So we then look at, well, if we reduce it here because we've reduced conversational challenges or reduce conversational waste, meaning is what I'm asking for, or is the work being done because we all understood each other from the beginning, or that my message was getting across, or is that person having to repeat themselves regularly? Because that all takes time and money. Maybe at an individual level might be a way of looking at how do we measure that? And that can be, okay, so if you've got 8 hours a day and 2 hours of that is resending and recommunicating, let's have a look at our conversational levels, our conversational patterns. Is there a way of reducing that time? And that then you can turn that into dollars and cents type of measure.
Yeah, interesting. You brought like what are the pain points from that company or that department or that leader, and I think that's a really good way to start, but not accepting that first pain point as a true, challenging with a few questions like what
Of
makes
course.
this hard to you, or how do you think that it's coming from, or where do you think that's coming from? Break down a little bit that initial pain point, because they might be some general statements, like our safety performance is not where we want them to be, something like this. And then you break down a little bit to see what actually are the pain points, and then you do that kind of a checking. Your first impression, your first measurement, or your first understanding of that pain point is crucial. I'm saying that you probably have seen that in the past as well, when people try to measure benefits or improvements or return of investment just afterwards, and they haven't taken the benchmark in the beginning, like where they were and what was the problem when they started. So once you're there, there's no way back. So it's really important for whoever is starting any coaching development program to thinking up in the front, like I need to do the checking phase, make sure I have the information I will need in the end to compare.
Definitely.
That's a great one. It's that where are you at today, and what are, as you said, your pain points? What are the things that are keeping you awake at night or making your world difficult? And then through that coaching process, doing almost regular check-ins. So if you were, let's say, on a scale of 1 to 10, if when you came in here, we said 1 is you're most frustrated, 10 is you're happiest, you flowing in the world of work. Where are you now? If you came in at a 3 during the coaching process, where does that elevate to? Because if it's going backwards, it might do that sometimes because change is difficult and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But by the end of the coaching process, you want to have seen that progress, that people are feeling that they have improved, that work is easier, that the pain points have reduced.
Yeah. Yeah, and establishing and making that agreement in the first hand, like, listen, our
Mm,
time together, our project will be 6 months or 12 months or whatever is the length. How often do you think we should check in? Ask that question to the
mm,
company, to the person leading the project. Like, we should be looking at a quarterly review or anything like that. But just making that agreement also helps to hold them accountable, because they know there will be conversations around it in the near future, and that's what one of the external motivator to some people.
In your experience and the coaching programs you've done, are there any formal assessments or things that you will formally look at before you start into a coaching process to say this is going to be our benchmark?
Since coach essentially and fundamentally involves people, no other way to do coaching without people, right? We're going to be looking at personal behaviors and skills or gaps that they want to fill. So that would be the formal way, I guess, like listing
Mm,
and naming it, and putting that in a paper. What are the things that to solve that pain point or to solve that problem that you think you need to improve, or any of your management reviews have revealed it to you that you need to improve? That can be an external source as well, because I think there is a fancy name on psychology from it. When we rate ourselves higher than we actually are, there is an effect on it. I can't remember right now. And that's very natural. Like, I can say I'm speaking
mm,
very well and I'm doing my job very well, but actually you are not. So that happens to everyone. So what I'm trying to say is also encourage that person or that group or that company to look at external data that can show them where they are not there yet. Can be related to regulators, can be related to performance review, can be related to past events analysis or investigations, can be source of daily problems that they are struggling. So I think that is one of the ways to get input for the skills gaps or behaviors gaps, and
mm,
list of things that they need to work on as a way of doing that formal assessment. And then you go on the scale, as you said, 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, bad, good, or excellent, whatever we scale it. That's a starting point.
I was just thinking, like, sometimes any one of us can put into projects where, right, you're going to coach these people. Now, those people or those leaders or individuals, let me say, weren't necessarily the ones saying, oh, I want coaching. I need coaching. Right.
True.
So generally, they've kind of voluntold.
Yeah.
In so, in your experience, how do you overcome that barrier, I suppose, so that we can actually then create that environments for growth?
Yeah. You just helped me to reflect, Karin, like that on the safety business. It's something like that as well. You are selling something for good with no price, and sometimes people don't want it. You know what I mean? Hey, I'm selling safety. I want
Absolutely.
to help you.
Yeah.
I want to help. That's for your good. No thanks. How so? You know what I mean? It's free. I'm not charging you as an internal
I didn't ask you.
yeah, it's as an internal member of the organization, you are giving them that service for free, right? And coaching somehow like this as well. I'm here to help and him to support you. Company has provided you this resource, and here I am. And the person, no thanks, come later, or something like this. It happens very often, and usually with safety and coaching. I had an experience where I can't remember if I was introducing myself or someone had briefly introduced me to in one of the sites which I was working on. Very first time meeting them, they haven't seen me before. And then, so here is Alex, he's going to be our safety performance coach. And Alex, it's all yours. Something like this. Just hand over to me. And said, and then everyone was looking to me, and they came straight away without me saying any word. He said, I have never met a coach before. What do you do? So I kind of noticed that there was a barrier, as you mentioned, like, what are you gonna? And then actually the second person said, what are you gonna teach me? A group of very experienced workers, much senior than me coming from another country with a different accent and language, coming from a different industry as well, like totally different industry. And I said, well, first of all, I'm not here to teach you anything. It's actually the other way around. I'm here to learn from you what's going on and how can we jointly have a conversation about the issues that are going on. So that was the way I tried to break that initial conflict or hard moment, I would say. And they immediately stopped doing those quick and hard questions. So they say, all right, so have a seat, man, and then we can talk later. And then that's it. I don't have a script or a prompt to tell you my whole history or the history of coaching and safety and all this. I just want you to get to know my name first and who I am and what kind of a role I'm playing here while I am around. One-on-ones conversations afterwards to explain what I'm doing would work much better than a group presenting, because then it becomes more a training and a teaching if I'm going in a group setting and trying to explain what coaching is and how do I work and all that stuff. So I tried the two ways. Group settings doesn't help. People will kind of think you are there to teach them. And one-on-ones afterwards, after you just have said your role or kind of a brief of who you are, and then you go one-on-ones and explain them better, what's the coaching about and how could we potentially partner together. There were people, like you said, there who said, I understand your role, man. You sounds like a very nice guy, but I don't think that's for me. I'm pretty well. I'm doing well. I know my business. Just come around if you need something, and we are fine. Don't push hard. I don't think that imposing
No.
people will help. I kind of go on the flow. Yeah, no, I come later to have a shot and then go slowly and steady, developing the relationship first, see if they can trust me. There is a lot of questions and barriers around external coaches. Are they there to report and tell management about my work, or are they there to just help me and have a conversation? So usually it takes a couple of interactions until people really let that barrier off and say, all right, so here's the things I'm facing, or here are my pain points. How can you help me? And and as time goes by, you can kind of measure yourself on how much people are coming to you to ask for something or talk to you rather than you are seeking to them. As I said in the beginning, you need to be present, visible, interacting, and relentless trying to engage. But once you did your part of the deal and then they are coming to you, that's a really positive sign of a relationship and trust and engagement in coaching.
Absolutely. I guess the trick is how do we then translate that for the people that are actually paying us to be there? So how do we then translate that? Because it's absolutely a wonderful measure when people start coming to us or coming to you.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah. And that's why I
yeah,
think in that identify the involved people up in the front as well, asking
yeah,
the management who are the people that they think they should be coached. Perhaps asking them as well, have them been experienced coaching before? Have you asked
mm,
them if they think there is available? And perhaps that gonna bring you some insights on that you need first a coaching education,
mm,
which is someone
Mm.
giving them a 20 minutes explanation of what is coaching before those
mm.
external coaches coming in and say, here's me and that's what I'm doing. So yeah, some learnings from this small talk just before. Get some coaching education. I love it. Yeah.
Well, the contracting piece is such an important piece,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's easy to just let that slide, and actually, we never should do that.
Yeah.
And just the word of who takes responsibility for all of this as well. You know,
What do you mean, Karen?
well, so what I'm thinking, there's this. Well, how do we prove return on investment or engagement? Is another nice word, right? And I guess it depends on, well, where does the accountability lie for that return on engagement? We have to obviously, as the external coaches, definitely provide information and some sort of feedback mechanism. And that, I think that's really important in that contracting piece as well. What do you want, you customer, or the senior leader or the person that's bringing us on board, to say, what is it that you're looking for? What will the success look like for you? And then
Beautiful.
we can go into, so how do we prove that along the way? What are the steps? And
Mm.
I think it might have been you, Nola, who said, what are the check-in points? where are the gates along the way, so that there's also responsibility from the people that we're contracting to. Not so easy.
Yeah.
No, it's not easy at all. And it's
No.
one of those where I think that benchmarking in the beginning will actually
Yeah.
be a good foundation and something that can probably be improved upon. Let's go back and have a look at, what have we done in the past that maybe hasn't actually given enough robustness to that initial benchmarking. And then doing that check-in with the project manager or the contracting party and going, this is the level where we're starting at. And realistically, what would a good outcome look like after 3-6 months? Because, they might say, oh, well, if people are saying they're on a 2 or 3 at the moment, we want them on a 10. You have to then manage that process as well,
Indeed.
because where is the realism in all of this? Karen, what you were saying there, I think is quite right, that sometimes you almost let that slide because you go, well, I've got my benchmark, but actually going and having that check-in with the project manager or going, what will success look like after a process here, is stepping out of a comfort zone and going, well, we know we're going to make a difference. We know that this is going to improve,
Yeah.
but the degree of improvement might not be meeting their expectations. So manage the expectation right up front so that by the end of it, you haven't disappointed, but you've actually either met or exceeded.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah. And you mentioned two things, Nuala and Karin started that as well, is benchmarking. I always say be careful with benchmarking. It can be helpful, it can be interesting, but can be dangerous as well, because even though companies in the same industry, they have totally different scenarios and things affecting their performances. So yes, benchmark is just a reference, but sometimes people got so addicted or so convincing that that benchmark is a true, like, and should be the same for them. So that's one, like, just be careful with benchmarking. And the second one is on embracing the learnings. When we said who takes the accountability or who is going to take that bad news back to the management. It can happen, like a coach is not a silver bullet that will solve all the problems, and there is like a formula and it just go and just butterflies and rainbows. It can goes to zero, can goes to negative results in terms of development. And I think that embracing the learning and knowing or getting the understanding what has impacted your coaching program, was that internal or external, quality of the coaches, quality of the program, was that leadership involvement and responsibility, engagement, was it an external factor, like an industry downsizing, like a commodity price, whatever is the factor that has affected any crisis or disaster, just knowing that it can happen and be prepared to map that, what has detracted or enhanced your coaching experience as well. I think that's a learning by itself to both sides, to the coaching company who will review the process, program, people, and the contractor or client who will look like, okay, next time I develop any leadership or safety leadership program, I need to be careful of this, and that. So I think at the end of the day, it's a win-win in terms of learning, but yeah, it can be negative or zero.
I think you just raised something really important for us, I suppose, for those that are going into that, is what are the potential moments that could shift even what we can even do? If something within the organization changes, that does impact what we can do or achieve.
Yep.
So interesting. I wonder if there is a way that we can actually almost, in that contracting piece, the piece up front, especially if we're going to be there somewhere for 6 to 12 months, things change.
Yep.
Life,
A lot.
humanity, right?
Yeah.
Leadership.
Leadership. What
Yeah.
would be the impact on this scenario or this type of scenario or this type of scenario? I mean, you can't know what's going to happen, but we've been around enough to know that things happen. And I think that's probably showing a little bit of respect also into the whole process for everybody involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. And being able to then actually have those conversations because there's already a foundation of expectation.
Yeah.
Especially when there are potential for negative or zero results. when that isn't an expectation or a potential, or it hasn't even come into the consideration that we're doing this coaching program, but actually it could turn out that there's some quite fundamental stuff we need to change in our organization, and it's scary and it's not what we were expecting to come out of this. Having that expectations and contracting session right up front would possibly open the door to far more inclusive, open relationships and conversations and ability to deal with some of those potential things when they go wrong, but also the ability to celebrate when they go right and say,
Yeah.
it has been achieved, or this has been an over and above. We planted a little acorn and we were expecting it to take 5 years to come to fruition. But you know what? In 12 months, look at the amazing results that you've already got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that brought me a question that usually clients, when they are contracting, when they are hiring, even on tender process, they usually ask the contractor, will you be able to attend or meet such and such requirement? Can be experienced people, can be manpower, whatever. And that question also could work on the other way around. Would you be open to change fundamentals stuff on your organization in order to make the progress that you need? It's a helpful and a very healthy discussion to have as well. Like, I will give my best, but you as well to agree and put your best on changing whatever needs to be changed or adjusted for the sake of this program success. So, yeah, interesting question.
Yeah. Love that.
It is.
Yeah.
And when we're looking at that, there's stuff that's visible, it's you can almost like touch and feel it, and there's stuff that there aren't. So one of the things we spoke about, Alex, was around the different lenses that we need to use when we're actually looking at measuring return on investment.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you, what are your thoughts around those lenses when we wanting to have a look at, well, what are the measures? What are the benefits?
I think we can name it tangible and non-tangible things. Like a production rate is something we can touch. We can see oil coming out of the rig. We can see coal coming out of the face. Whatever is that increase of that we are helping to achieve. We can consider some tangible stuff as well. Some numbers that company has, not only in production or operation, but safety as well, and that usually link it to some leading indicators. The amount of conversations that leadership is having, not only amount but quality. How much people are engaging on formal training sessions. What is the feedback quality that's coming out of those interactions? How much debriefings are happening as we are talking to people about the importance of learning from everyday operations, or investigations, or learning from incidents? What is the outcome of those reports and discussions? Are we improving something, or are we just doing reports by the sake of reports? So if those pain points that we started back in the beginning are related to some of those existing leading indicators, that's a great way to measure. And that's another thing that we need to think of. It's very, very hard to put data running and being available. Sometimes we need to create things, process, procedures, systems, monitoring. Sometimes we need people with paper clips looking at the numbers and reporting back to the management. Whatever we create as an indicator, it needs to first try to use the ones available. Don't create more stuff to other people. It requires a lot of efforts to put some data available. So I think that's working with your pain points, cross-checking them with the existing indicators that company has. How do they relate? How reliable are they as well? You need to challenge those correlations and use them as a reference. That might be a way of looking at the tangible things that you have.
And then the non-tangible is often so much the harder thing. I think what you were saying about the soft skills, soft data earlier, Alex.
Yeah.
Is that when you can see teams' relationships improving, the way of being together as a team, it's visible, but it's one of those things like, how do you kind of measure that? Or the flow on from creating better conversations means you're creating a better work environment, a safer work environment, your quality improves. it's not specifically related to the coaching process, but it's almost a byproduct that is, I suppose some of it is tangible, but a lot of it is a non-tangible benefit because it's happening regardless. It's just an add-on or a ripple effect from the positive impact of having the coaching process. I had
Yeah.
a conversation a while ago, and it was with a client I hadn't seen in probably 80 years. And I called her to ask her advice on something else. And it was one of those benefits of where she said, you know, I still go back to what we did 8 years ago, and I cannot tell you how it has changed the trajectory of my working career, my teams, the way that I interact with people, and just how much better we are and have continued to be from that engagement that we had 8 years ago. And for me, that was such an amazing compliment to the work that Karen and I did with that team. But 8 years later, this is a non-tangible, it's a non-visible. We don't even know that it's happening. I just came up in a conversation that the impact is still going on. And I don't think you can actually put a price to something like that.
Exactly. No, fabulous, fabulous. Well
No,
done. Yeah.
we often talk about legacy, and we don't know often in the roles that we have. We don't always know, and very rarely know until somebody approaches us sometime later what the legacy is of those conversations that we have in the wee hours of the morning of the smoke shack or wherever it might be. And
Mm,
it's delightful. It's delightful.
it is. Yeah. It remind me one of the ways of getting to know what impact on business we have through others. An experience I had recently was going at the end of a project and doing some summary or debriefing conversations with the leaders who I engaged for a certain amount of time and asking them a few informational or basic questions. But at the end as well, I was asking like, what have you noticed changing on this space in this such period? And like, what have you noticed that has changed? And then they could say whatever they noticed, like, oh, I'm seeing people are more collaborative, or I can see people are bringing more ideas during the daily meetings. And that's good, but that does not mean much for me in terms of the business, right? So I know what's happening. I know what they are telling me in terms of concept, but then the next question I asked was what impact does that have on your business, on your department, on your, like, what happens when this happens? And then you can slightly change in that non-tangible to tangible things. Oh, I can see that our reports are expediting more because people are helping each other by Friday, 5 p.m. to get that done because there's no one on weekends here. So I can come on Monday, say everything was done. So, and then you start changing that soft data or soft skills improvement into a tangible business impact. So that was one of the ways to transform, but you can only have that on conversation. You cannot transform that in a lead indicator or a monitoring point or whatever. It's just having the conversation and translating that to something meaningful. And actually, that became a learning to them as well to do with their teams. One of the leaders said, "Oh, those are really good ways of getting feedback from what we are doing. I might get some of those questions." I said, "It's all yours. They are not mine. Just it came on the conversation. They are not my questions." But I remember that clearly. Like translating or transforming that good communication or collaboration into a business stuff that only they can correlate by the end of the day. I couldn't even thinking of how that collaboration could helping a technical report to come out by the end of the Friday 5 p.m. So
And it goes back to that beauty of asking open questions and having the skill to ask that open question without the expectation of, I'm hoping that they're going to say this. It's just what is there. Because when you have that, exactly your experience, it was a surprise of, wow, that's something really tangible. It's something that we are absolutely having an impact on. And it might be, we've noticed we have less rework because we're not having to repeat processes. People are actually doing things the right way the first time round rather than having to go back and correct and rework or reissue. So what I'm loving through this conversation is that there's probably as coaches more data available to us than we've actually considered.
Quite
And the
right.
question is, what do we do with this data and how do we turn it into something that goes, here is an amazing overview of what we have done that has had a real business impact that is tangible, that when you look at those overall tangible benefits and you kind of work a formula to say, well, these are the tangible benefits, this was the cost of the program. Actually, you know what? Was pocket change in comparison to what it's actually given the business in result of having a process like this happen.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a nice kind of summary of where we're going to go to start wrapping up here. So, a little miracle question. So, a miracle has just occurred, and you are able to create the coaching environment, that safety coaching environment that you've always wanted. What does that miracle look like or feel like?
Mm, that sounds exciting. Uh,
Does. Yeah.
yeah, I think a beautiful or a awesome coaching environment would start with people sharing their weaknesses and their weak points or areas where they would like to improve, having that growth mindset. So whatever they are ranked in the company or the organization, they say, listen, I'm the CEO or I'm the senior leader or I'm the manager or I'm the supervisor on the field, whatever. And there's something that it's annoying me or it's boring me. I need to get better at this. So that's a beautiful way to start. So
Mm,
and I want you to help me, Karin, Nula, or Alex, or whoever is the coach. I want you to work with me. So that's a halfway of the job done. So there is a self-awareness, there is a willingness to improve. That does not mean that we won't challenge that statement. Like I said in the beginning, like
yeah.
that's pain point, maybe just a symptom of other problems. So we can go and further investigate that. I would be invited to majority of the interactions, even though they are not related to safety or leadership. So people would be willing me to have me there. Alex, can you come to our budget meeting and have a seat?
Mhm.
Even though if I have no say or no words, or just be there and watch what happens. Alex, can you go for a drive around and have a chat with my team workers? So that would be a beautiful way to having a coaching program or development happening. With that, I would be more and more comfortable to provide feedback to people and invite them to a feedback conversation. And they would be taking that on their inner game, like absorbing and taking what makes sense for them. And then I would be debriefing and summarizing the end and asking them those same questions, like what has changed and what does that mean to your business? Yeah.
Thank you so much for all of that. That's wonderful. Yeah,
And
Yeah.
let's have a beer. Thanks for your service.
exactly. Fantastic. Well, that was an amazing conversation, and I really hope that people who are listening to this conversation really get an essence and a sense of what is actually contributing to successful coaching interventions. I'm not sure I like that word so much, but conversations for change. So thank you so much from my side.
Oh no, Alex, it's been absolutely divine. I love our conversations and I'm so grateful that we get to have them, but I'm even more grateful that today we got to record it and that
Yay!
you get to listen to it out there, which will just be absolutely wonderful. We will share in the show notes and on the summary your contact details as well. So your LinkedIn profile and where people can connect with you, because it's always good to have conversations that matter. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm delighted, and I hope there are some feedbacks and people reverting back to the episode as well and sharing their own experience, like what has worked, what has not worked. Does what we discussed here make sense to them or not? So I'm keen to get some feedback as well. So appreciate you both having me, as I said. Wonderful conversation. Learn a lot. Took some notes here. So every
Well
day,
done.
a different learning. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. It is always lovely to have conversations that matter. To learn more about creating a culture of safety and care, please visit our website, safetycollaborations.com, to access our show notes, resources, and guides. Leave us a message via the Message Us section on the show notes page, and we'll get back to you.
You can also join our community on social media by following us on our LinkedIn pages, Safety Collaborations, Karen Avari and Nuala Gage, and on our new Safety Collaborations social channels, YouTube, Facebook and Instagram. Our handle Safety Collaborations is much the same. Sharing is caring. Follow us on your favourite podcast platform. Leave us a 5-star review would be awesome. Doing these things helps us to grow and share our collective conversations. Till next time,
Stay safe
and stay well.